So I know I'm like 2 weeks late to this, but I finally binged The Penguin last weekend. I watched the first two episodes right when they came out, so the 2 weeks they came out. They did a really weird thing when The Penguin first released, where the first episode came out on, was it like a Thursday night or something? And then there was like a whole week, and then after that week, the episode came out on a Sunday, and then the rest of the episodes came out on a Sunday. I mean, I get for marketing purposes, but I feel like if you're releasing episodes weird like that, like you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot and making it harder for people to follow your show. Because if somebody watches that first episode and the day it comes out and they're like, oh my God, this is great, then the following week they're just going to look for it on a Thursday and then they're going to be like, what happened? Is there no episodes? Okay. And then they're going to forget about the show and not watch it. Am I right on that or am I wrong on that? Let me know. Anyway, the reason I stopped watching after those first two episodes, even though I really liked them, was because I wanted to rewatch The Batman. And I haven't seen The Batman since around when it first came out in March of 2022. Funny enough, I started rewatching The Batman like 4 or 5 times in the years since it came out, but it's a long movie. It's like just at 3 hours or something. It's a long movie. So I'd always start watching it, and then after like the first hour, something would always come up, and I'd have to stop watching it. So I've seen that first hour a lot of times, but the rest of the film I hadn't seen since it first came out. So felt like I'd get more out of the Penguin as a show if I had seen the Batman super recently, and I was kind of right because I revisited the movie, and then I came back to the show, and I watched those first two episodes, and even the first two episodes just hit a little bit more for me, where I was like, I liked them a lot the first time, but now on rewatch, I'm liking them just a little bit more. And the rest of the show was just phenomenal, I thought. One of the best DC TV shows. I mean, look, I'm a big Arrowverse guy. I'm a big Superman and Lois guy. I'm a big Smallville guy. But a lot of people do not give those shows the time of day, and they're like, look, they're CW DC shows. Don't look at them. Nothing from DC has come close to, like, Daredevil, for example, people say. I think The Penguin is like that prestige, high up, high quality DC show that you can now be like, look, this is our Daredevil in a sense, and I'm really happy about that. I mean, I don't think I liked it more than I love Smallville or Superman and Lois or the Arrowverse shows, but I think as quality of TV, it's going to be pretty hard to get a better DC show than this. I hope like Lanterns, I think, is the first main DCU show, and it's also going to be HBO original and get this sort of budget and stuff like that. And I hope Lanterns can match what the Penguin is putting out. Also, I remember in like the 2 weeks before this show came out, they announced that the show was no longer a Max original, because HBO Max thing, that it was now a HBO original. And it's the whole thing where it's like, no shade towards Max, but I feel like there's always a difference in quality between what a HBO Max show is and what a HBO original show is. Like if I hear that a show is a HBO original, it immediately makes me 10 times more excited for it. I immediately expect a higher bar of quality than if a show is a Max original. And I kind of thought them announcing this 2 weeks ahead of time meant that the show was going to have Max quality, but just have the HBO stamp on it. But no, the show feels like a proper full-fledged HBO original. Like think of your favorite HBO original shows. The Penguin matches most of them in quality for sure, in my opinion. It was fantastic throughout. Colin Farrell plays the Penguin, or Oz, because I guess they don't want to call him Oswald Cobblepot for some reason, but he plays Oz better than any other version of the character. Like, sorry to Danny DeVito in Batman Returns, but Colin Farrell is my The Penguin. Maybe hot take, I'm not crazy on Batman Returns, I've never really liked that film. Anyway, the Gotham version of the Penguin is also great, but I do feel like what Matt Reeves and the crew from the Batmanverse have put into this show is a much stronger interpretation of the character than anything we've seen before. I also really enjoyed, like, just in general, the vibe of Gotham in this. Like, the Batman already set up Gotham really well, and this show followed it up by making it feel just that more of a real city than it did in the film, which is really impressive. Other characters I really liked, a big one everybody's mentioning is Sofia Falcone, played by Cristin Millioti. She's a huge standout. Backstory in the flashbacks featuring her character make her more layered and more interesting than I think a lot of people are expecting. And she's instantly one of the most enjoyable DC TV villains, which is funny to say that a character in this show is one of the most enjoyable DC TV villains when it feels like every single character in this show is technically a DC TV villain. Like, Oswald's a villain, Sofia's a villain, the Maronis are villains. Everyone in this show is technically a DC TV villain. Like, have we had something like that before, live action from DC? The other big character in the show we're talking about is Victor, played by Renzi Feliz. maybe butcher that name, sorry. He played Alex in Marvel's Runaways back in like 2017, 2018, which that show ran for 3 seasons. It was a really interesting show. I think it's different than you would expect. Like even in terms of like Marvel television back then always had a different feel to the MCU movies. But I think even Runaways came out as like somewhat of a unique show among Marvel television. It's kind of geared towards a different audience than like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Agent Carter or like the Netflix shows would have been. But Runaways, I thought Alex in it was a solid character, but I don't think he ever stood out to me as much among the supporting cast of that show or the main cast of that show. Because Runaways was an ensemble show, so it made it hard really to focus on one character too much. But I think Victor in the Penguin is a much more interesting character than Alex was in Runaways. I think kind of what the actor gets to play with here is so good, and I think he might actually have been my favorite character in the show. Like I really enjoyed following his story and seeing how this kid becomes unfortunately wrapped up in Oz and the Falcones and Maronis and all the schemes that sort of wraps him in and brings him into the world. No spoilers, but I just think the way his story plays out is really well done. I also just in general really appreciated this show was not afraid to embrace the fact that we're following villains. Like most of the people on this show are bad people, and the show knows that. And yes, focusing on so much of them and making them sympathetic and giving everyone reasons and motivations is extremely important, but at the end of the day, these are all still villains. And while most shows would take a more boring angle of like trying to wipe away or clean up the fact that they're villains and acting like in their own show, now that we're focusing on them more, that you need to give a reason why they're actually good. The Penguin doesn't do that. Like, it embraces the fact that these people are all pieces of shit, and we see Oz do terrible, terrible things, so that despite watching him for 8 full episodes and understanding why he is the way he is, at the end of the show, we're still like, I hope the Batman finds him and beats the shit out of him in the Batman Part 2. Like, it's really, really, really cool when a show is able to do that. Like, I respect that so much. The music is fantastic. Thought it was one of the best things about the show, honestly. It's a standout among standouts. And the Batman was scored by Michael Giacchino, and the Penguin is scored by Michael's son, Mick Giacchino. And it's I mean, when you hear that, you might like straight away go, you're not expecting the score to be as good as the Batman, but I thought the Penguin score was just as good as the Batman. I thought the Penguin's theme, like the main theme for Oz as a character, is one of the best villain main themes I've ever heard on anything. Like it's a great piece of music, and I've been listening to it nonstop. Like it's the bit of music that starts playing at the very end of the finale, and it's just so good. Now, I saw a lot of people comparing the show to The Sopranos. I don't know if people have actually watched The Sopranos and they've just heard it's like a crime mafia show set in America. I actually watched The Sopranos for the first time this year, went through all 6 seasons after it being on my list forever. But the levels of actual crime, mafia, mob, action shit happening in The Sopranos is like 2% of that entire show. Like, The Sopranos is not at all like The Penguin. I don't know, maybe it's just me getting that. Like, The Sopranos is great, The Penguin is great, but there's practically nothing in common between the two shows besides vaguely similar references to crime stuff, I guess. Like, I don't know. I think people have an idea in their head about what The Sopranos is. Like, people who haven't watched the show, I think it's a show that it isn't. And then they go, because I was surprised when I watched The Sopranos. I'd been hearing about it for years and I watched it and I was like, wow, this is a much slower character drama than I was expecting. And The Sopranos is pretty much that for 6 seasons. Like, The Sopranos, Penguin, both great, but there's nothing in common between these two shows that I could really see. So anyway, didn't want this to be an overly long video. It's just a new DCTV show I want to talk about for a few minutes. What did you think about The Penguin if you've seen it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Have you never seen it? Are you not interested in watching it? I feel like if you're watching this video, you've probably seen it though. Let me know. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And if you're not, please make sure to like and share because that is always a huge help. Thanks so much for watching and have an amazing day.